time for NRCS Partyline today for your, it's already Wednesday, January the 15th. The year of 2020, NRCS Partyline brought to you by Wimmer Opticians, St. Cloud Atlas Family Chiropractic of Waite Park. My name is Brad Melke. We got big old snowflakes coming down. Big old flakes, snowfall today. About a couple inches. They're saying maybe today 2 to 3 inches, something like that. It's adding up fast with those big old flakes outside. Currently our temp, according to the Community Technology Center weather station, we have 13 degrees. Winds are fairly calm, northwesterly at about 3 miles an hour. So that's what we have. Snow in the forecast today, and high of where we're at right now, and that's 13 degrees. Boy, we have a full studio with us this morning. Oh, I got to get all your titles right. First, Dennis Fuchs, administrator with the Stearns County Soil and Water Conservation District, joining us. Jason Selvog, Soil Conservationist, SWCD. Right, Jason? Yeah. Sure. Chris Hogge is joining us, District Conservationist of the NRCS, and Ryan Rothstein, Wildlife Biologist, SWCD, all in studio. Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
You want to meow, Dennis? Because you had a question.
Oh, yeah. So you remember we were telling listeners that if you have a question, we have a place on our website where you can say, Ask KASM a question. And we didn't get a lot of them, but we did get one. So I'm going to share that with your listeners right now. And they didn't put a name here. It's just a Stearns County farmer. And the question was, why does Dennis meow so much? Inquiring minds want to know. Okay, I will answer this because I'm really happy at my job, and it just makes me go meow, 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 meow.
You don't purr very much, though.
No, well, I'm not much of a purr.
You're not much of a purr.
Right.
More of a meower.
I'm a snorer.
Snore? Well, we got that straight. I appreciate
Can I call that purring?
Oh, what are we talking about today?
Well, the reason why I asked Ryan and Jason to join us today is we're right in the middle of a CRP, Conservation Reserve Program sign up. And just when I'm out and about during the holidays, there's a lot of questions from my friends and family members about, what the CRP, what's a sign up, what's it all about, re-enrollment, how do I sign up an area, a wet spot that I wasn't able to harvest this past year, and I've been having trouble farming it the last couple wet seasons here. So I said, you know what, I'm going to get Jason and Ryan on the air here, and you just make sure you're listening to KASM, and you'll get all the answers that you need and all the information you need about CRP. So here they are. They're going to talk a lot about CRP today.
Boy, a lot to live up to with that intro. Wow.
So this is Jason talking. CRP sign-up started. Typically, CRP has a general CRP sign-up once a year, usually. There's two types of CRP. There's the general CRP, which started December 9th and is running through February 28th. And that's the old CRP that most people are familiar with. You make an offer on a particular field or fields with the Farm Service Agency, and then you get a score attached to the type of cover that you want to put on there, whether it's native grasses, wildflowers, food plots, cool season or introduced species. You get points attached to that, and then you compete with other landowners nationwide. And that sign-up is running through February 28th. If you're interested in something like that, you need to contact the Farm Service Agency in Stearns County. You can make an appointment. A lot of times you can just talk to Kelly, is the CRP person at the Farm Service Agency. You can talk to her on the phone. She can get your field that you're interested in. She usually brings that information over to our office, and then Ryan and I will look at see what practice within CRP that may fit. The other type of CRP that's real common is the continuous CRP, which is continuously open for enrollment. It means there's typically no ending date, except this year there is. It's August 21st. So this sign-up is open from December 9th to August 21st. And that is, if you're eligible, you can enroll. And it's mainly for water quality type practices. So filter strips, buffer strips, wetland restoration practices, those types of practices are eligible for the continuous. And really what they're looking at is buffering or filtering areas of wetlands and or restoring wetlands on cropland soils. So those are a couple of things that with CRP that we're dealing with. We have 3 million extra acres compared to the last sign-up to enroll. I think this sign-up is probably going to be a little bit less competitive than the previous one. If you're interested in CRP, I would say contact the Farm Service Agency and get the ball rolling with the areas that you're interested in enrolling. We can find out what practices it may fit with.
Sounds more complicated than previously, or maybe not.
They did change a few things with CRP. There is a practice called SAFE, which stands for State Acres for Wildlife Enhancement. That was a continuous CRP practice, and it's a prairie planting practice in this part of the state. They have moved that practice into the general CRP sign-up, so it's not eligible. And mainly, I think it's because it's not a water quality practice; it's a wildlife practice. So they moved that into the general. So that did confuse things a little bit from the last sign-up.
So the continuous CRP, the deadline August 21st before there wasn't a deadline.
Correct. Yeah.
Why did they implement that?
I think they probably implemented a deadline because they don't know how many acres they're going to get enrolled, and they can't go over the 27 million acres? I can't even.
27 million is the cap.
Yeah, so they can't enroll more than 27 million acres nationwide. I think after that August 21st, they're going to determine where we at. Are we below or at? And then if we still have acres to enroll, they'll open it up back up again, is my thought.
Okay. All right. So start thinking about that.
Yes.
Because time is limited for both, but not so much for, you got until the 28th for the regular CRP.
Yeah, and, our office has quite a few landowners that had, landowners that have CRP expiring or expired, which is different this sign up too. 2017, 18, and 19 expiring CRP. If they didn't have an option to re-enroll under the previous sign up, they can enroll it this time if there's an acceptable practice for those fields. So that it probably gained us another 60, 70 people that have expiring contracts. So we've got a list we work off of in our office. If somebody called and said they're interested in CRP, we add them to the list and we contact them as we go down the list and determine what they're eligible for and try to get them in the program.
So the eligibility is the key.
Yep. Eligibility has to be cropped at least 4 years between 2012 and 2017. And cropped meaning it has to be certified with the Farm Service Agency as being a commodity crop. And then also there's eligibility based on what practice they want to enroll in. So if they want to do a wetland restoration, they have to have so much wetland soils versus upland soils. And that's what Ryan and I do. Mm-hmm. We determine if they're eligible for those things.
So there's a lot of different practices that could be.
Yes, there's many practices within CRP. I would say probably the most common we use in Stearns County would be filter strips, wetland restorations, and then prairie plantings is probably the most common ones. We do have practices within the continuous that are tree plantings, so we can do field windbreaks, we can do shelter belts around farmsteads, we can do living snow fences along highways and roads to prevent snow distribution on top of the road. So those are some of the tree planting practices we can do with the continuous. And under the general sign-up, you can do a general tree planting, so you could plant 40 acres to trees if you'd like to. You just have to offer it into that practice.
How's the sign-up so far?
Sign-up is moving along. We've got several landowners that have stopped in. Unfortunately, the Farm Service Agency's software for the SAFE program, which is a big program in Stearns County, is not functioning correctly. They're working on fixing that. But we're getting a lot of offers for expired CRP that landowners want to re-enroll for another 10 or 15 years.
So you have a lot more renewals than more newer signups.
Yes, right now, yes. We do have a fair amount of new landowners coming in too. The rental rates in Stearns County have changed. They updated them. The low end is 57. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan.
No, that's right.
The high end is 121, and that's for the continuous sign-up. The high end for the general sign-up is $114 an acre.
It does seem like a lot of them are right around that 100 to 115, though, from what we've seen so far.
Yeah, USDA breaks up the soils into three categories of dollar amounts. The largest dollar amount in Stearns County is that $114 amount. So for every soil type in the county is a dollar amount attached to that. And they take the three most predominant soils on a field you want to enroll, and then they prorate that based on those soils, and then you get a dollar amount per acre. Typically it's 114, 110 is real common.
Who does the equations?
Somebody with a big desk at DC would be my guess.
A wizard behind the curtain.
Wizard behind the curtain. All right. We got about a minute before we have to take a break. Anything before we stop here that we need to know here?
I would just say if landowners are interested in CRP or if thought about CRP on some fields where it's hard to farm, low producing soils, small fields, contact the Farm Service Agency and see if you can get those enrolled in CRP and at least get it planted to a cover that maybe you don't have to worry about putting a crop on it anymore.
So even if you sign up at the last of either the two deadlines, there's still, you don't have to have a project in place or things planned already at that point, right?
Nope.
That's just to get it started rolling.
Right. You've got 12 months to establish the cover once you get accepted.
Okay. All right. And if people have any questions as far as what we're talking about this morning, CRP or otherwise, you can call us here at the KASM radio station, 320-845-2184. We've got the SWCD NRCS representing us this morning on NRCS Partyline. Again, you can call and get your questions asked. I can ask on your behalf. We've got too many people and not enough headphones, so just a lack of headphones here at the station. So make sure you call in your question. I can ask those on your behalf. I'll relate the question to our guests if you have any. It's 9:30, time for our news break on KASM Radio. We are your dependable neighbor. Snowfall, 13 degrees. More NRCS Partyline today for your Wednesday, January the 15th, visiting with the representatives from the Soil and Water Conservation District and also NRCS joining us. Talking about CRP, we want to continue that conversation talking about maybe we should talk about the point system some more.
Yeah, sure. So for landowners under the general sign-up, that's more of a competitive process. You're competing nationwide against all of the other people that are trying to submit an offer for CRP. Most of the points you get under this system are based on where you're located in the country and within the state. But there are a few things that you as a landowner can do to try to increase that point system, which is why we recommend that you try to work with either FSA or Jason and myself, because being that we work with this all the time, we can really try to maximize the score. One of the biggest things a landowner can do is the cover type they choose. Typically, the native habitats, the native grasses, the wildflowers will score better. So we typically recommend that over the introduced species just because they don't score as well. Another thing that we've really been pushing this sign up is some of the enhancements. Pollinator habitat's a pretty big one where it'll give you a nice boost. And it's usually a pretty small area. Has to be minimum half acre in size. 10% or at least 10% of the offer. So it's typically only a couple acres at most. We've really been pushing that, or even food plots, I think, get you 5 extra points. Yep. So those are two things we've been pushing. The other thing that a landowner can do, and I know this isn't typically a popular one, but if a landowner is willing to take a percentage below their maximum soil rental rate, they can get up to 25 extra points that way too. So that's another thing we at least ask them to consider if they're really serious about getting in.
So all of those points that you say, well, if you do this, you'll get this amount of points. Is that guaranteed, or could that always be looked upon by somebody else and saying, well, wait a minute, even though you thought you qualified, it doesn't?
Typically, once it leaves our office, it goes to National FSA, and they compare all the scores and analyze it. And even the scores that are sent off by our local FSA to them, they typically are awarded some extra points at the national level. Why, we don't really know.
Okay.
Wizard behind the curtain again.
There you go.
Yeah. And one of those things would be cost. You get extra points if it's less expensive to establish, or if the cover is already established, like a re-enrollment. So somebody came in and had a CRP that expired, they re-enrolled it into the same practice. There's a point value there for not having to spend federal dollars on establishment.
Are you allowed a certain amount of points up to? I mean, is there a cap on it? You can just keep building.
Well, there is a cap based on the point system. The points, the maximum points you can even achieve. Typically, under the last signups, every signup changes, but real common. I'd say 160 points to 200 is real common for somebody to get a good chance of getting accepted.
Okay.
Under the last signup, we had folks that had 203 points, I believe, was not accepted. It was a very competitive sign-up. They were only taking the cream of the crop, so to speak, into the program. I don't think it'll be as competitive this go around, but that remains to be seen. We haven't seen. We've only got, I think, 2 scores done so far in our office, and they're both of them are right around that 160 range.
So basically, it's you do what you can do, and then you can't reach for the points if they don't exist. In other words,
Yeah, I would
if
say
it's
that's
not
fair.
there.
Yeah. Like I said, a lot of these points are based on where you're at in the country and in the state. We're lucky in that Minnesota is located in the prairie pothole region of the country, so landowners in Stearns County automatically get those points. We're also in the pheasant habitat priority area. That's that safe practice, Jason.
Is that the handicap kind of it, the deal, or kind of like you're going to get these regardless kind of thing?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. That's fair to say.
Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, no, not at all. So that's where we're kind of lucky in that we already are in a couple of priority areas where landowners will get those points regardless. But we've just really been trying to encourage landowners to do these little extra things that will maximize their points and maximize their chance of getting accepted.
Okay. And how does that relate to habitat?
So typically with these native grasses and wildflowers, you're going to end up with better habitat versus those introduced species. Those native grasses stand up a lot better over winter. So, I mean, we keep saying all these practices. We can go through a couple of the common ones. Jason mentioned the safe practice. That's the pheasant habitat one. Typically, that's roughly about 30 species total, probably somewhere in the range of 10 grasses and probably 20 or so forbs or wildflowers. And those are typically a little more grass heavy because they're trying to provide more nesting habitat for pheasants. And it's great habitat for songbirds and deer and pretty much everything. Another common one with the pollinator enhancement we're talking about, that one is a lot more wildflower based. Before, under previous signups, it could only be up to 25% grasses. With the new signups, it can be up to 50% grasses. But the big difference between those there is that the pollinator one typically has quite a few more wildflowers than your standard prairie planting. And something like a filter strip, that's most commonly grasses. We can put forbs in it, but typically that's at least 3 grasses. And this is something, too, where as long as it meets NRCS's standards for these practices, if landowners want to do something a little different, we can certainly work with them, too, to try to accomplish whatever their goal is as long as we're still within these federal standards.
Okay. Dennis, how they do?
Well, I was just wondering if Jason, say I'm a new landowner and this is the first time I want to explore CRP, just kind of walk me through how the process would work. Okay, contact FSA, get an appointment, and then how much time am I going to be spending in the office to get this done? What am I doing next?
Well, real common what happens is landowner will contact the office and ask FSA about CRP. They have a particular field or fields that they're interested in doing. FSA checks the cropping histories. They make sure you're eligible based on cropping history. You have to meet that 4 years out of the 6 years they're looking at, and then you have to have owned the property for at least 1 year also. At that point, if it's eligible based on that, then they send a form over to Ryan and I with a map showing you what you want to do, the landowner's name, phone number. We'll contact the landowner and typically do a site visit, determine where they want to do it. And it's always best just to get out on the field, and sometimes the maps are a little bit deceitful on that, whether they're cropping this part or they're not cropping this, or so we'd like to look at the field. And sometimes they have an area where they want to put a food plot, so we try to mark that out while we're out in the field. And then we come back to the office, and usually at that point we're making maps. We usually make the map, send it to the landowner, and say, is this what you would like to do? If they say yes, then at that point we make an appointment with Farm Service Agency for them to come in and actually sign a contract. That whole process, depending on how busy we are, typically is probably, for a continuous CRP signup could be, 3 weeks maybe. Under the general signup is a little bit different because you come in and make an offer, and then you have to wait for the signup to end, which is February 28th. And then at that point, it's usually about a month or 6 weeks later, we'll find out who is accepted into the program. So under the general signup, the wait's a little bit longer. But most contracts will start, we try to start them on October 1st because that's the first day of the federal fiscal year. And then they'll run for 10 years or up to 15. The landowner can choose what they would like or how long they would like the practice to be. So that's kind of the process.
So if a person was going to be putting a crop out there, because it's not going to start until October 1st. Would you recommend small grains or soybeans where they could get that off of there then, because the crop has to be removed by October 1st if they're accepted?
If they're in the general sign-up, yes. Or if they're in the general sign-up, they can leave the crop on. So if it's corn, typically it seems like the corn seems to come off in November, which is after October 1st. If it's the continuous sign-up, they want the crop off by October 1st.
Okay.
So yes, if you want to crop it, and knowing you're going into CRP soybeans is kind of the ideal crop because there's less site prep involved for landowners. They harvest the soybeans in the fall and leave it alone, and then you would hire a vendor, or the landowner may plant it themselves, but they can drill the seed right into that stubble, soybean stubble.
So it sounds like by Monday we might have a foot or two of snow covering the field or potential area. What do you do then?
As far as like site visits and
Yeah.
stuff, you mean? Well, if it's cropland, it's pretty easy. We can look in the records and see if it was corn or soybeans or whatever it was for eligibility. If it's a re-enrollment, Ryan and I were just out on one last week. We went out there and just started kicking around and got through the crust and figured out what they had out there. And a lot of times, if it's a re-enrollment too, we've had status reviews that were done, which lists which species were out there. And then we've had a cover type inventory sheet that just, if they re-enrolled it, we have to go through that sheet and we have to list what species were out there at the time. So a lot of times we may default to that too.
Okay.
Very cool. Did you get any calls, Brad? Any listeners? Any questions that we didn't cover?
No, it's pretty quiet, Dennis.
Well, we had one question from a coworker about the 20%. Did you cover that incentive?
No, you want to take that one?
Well, so we might have to share this one. I got to try to remember it off the top of my head. Under the continuous sign-up, they used to have a fair number of payment incentives for enrolling in that. They removed them from the last sign-up, but they're back again, some of them. The way I understand it is that there's now a practice incentive payment, and is that the one that's 32.5%?
I believe so. Yes.
So for the practice incentive payment, you can get a one-time payment equal to 32.5% of your first year's annual payment.
It's basically extra cost share is what it is to implement the practice.
And what was there was one more too. What was that one?
I can't remember, to be honest with you. We haven't dealt with the continuous too much yet because we're focused on the general. Most of the continuous practices, unless it's new land, the re-enrollment stuff we can't process the paperwork till April 1st anyways, which is 6 months prior to the expiration, which is September 30th. So we're kind of focused on the general sign-up at this point.
So you can't even sign up for it anyway till April, you said.
If it's re-enrolling land, you have to wait till April. If it's new land coming out of corn, soybeans, we can do that anytime.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And either way, a landowner, if they're interested, can come in at any time. We keep a rolling list in our office of who was interested just to make sure we're keeping up with everybody. So if anybody's interested, they can come in at any time or call at any time. And at a minimum, we'll keep them on the list. And whenever they would be able to sign up for something, we would contact them again to get back in touch with them.
Okay.
All right, cool. I wanted Chris Hogge to visit a little bit. He talked to our SWCD board about some programs yesterday that he's managing out of the office. And one is the Environmental Quality Incentive Program, dollars to help farmers address their resource concerns. And the other is the Conservation Stewardship Program. And just big numbers last year, those two programs combined, Stearns County received $3 million, give or take a couple $100,000, to help farmers address their resource concerns, everything from cover crops to manure storage. So these are great programs, and Chris is just going to talk a little bit about those programs and where we are with signups and the workload.
Well, good morning, folks. We're wrapping up 2019 for EQIP, and we had a really good year. We completed 76 payments for practices that were completed within the county to help provide everything from erosion control to animal waste to nutrient management to high tunnel installation, pasture management, erosion control structures. So there was quite a bit of work done. We had a lot of back contracts in the county, so we cleaned a lot of those up. So all of our contracts right now are from 2019, so last year's sign up, and new ones that have practices to install in 2020. So we're in a really good place as far as the county goes and addressing the workload that we have. So we're starting to begin the new equip sign up for 2020, and we have about 33 or so applications. So we're looking to take applications for basically the same kind of practices. If you have any erosion control issues that you have identified when you were harvesting and working or doing any kind of tillage this spring or this fall, we could meet you out in the field and we could discuss those. If you had any ideas for using cover crops in this last fall or when it was raining and everybody was wet, and doing some cover crops for set aside ground, that would be something that would be an option also. So if you have any of those kind of practices that you're interested in, be more than happy to call the office and we can set up a time to meet with you and discuss those in more detail. We are starting to make a change in our planning process in the Stearns County SWCD and NRCS. We are starting to work with a different kind of perspective. We've been basically dealing with animal waste type facilities with sending out engineers. We're going to start sending out conservation planners to work with folks and kind of do a little bit more of a whole farm type plan, working with maybe establishing some pollinator or looking at cover crops or no-till options, or we can even do some windbreaks. We have folks in the office that are ready to do those kind of things. So basically the scenario would be if you come in and sign up for equip here this winter, we would be basically contacting you within 5 days with a phone call, setting up a field visit within a month, and to discuss what your long-term and short-term plans are, and then develop some sort of a plan, review it with you, see where we want to go, what you folks would like to move forward with, and then identify different cost assistance programs that would help you get there. So let's run an example. So if you had an animal waste facility that you were looking to do, you'd contact the office. We would basically, SoilCon would be calling you and setting up an appointment with you to discuss your farming operation and number of animals and that kind of stuff. Would meet you out on site, so it wouldn't be in the office. Would meet you out on site to look at everything, discuss your options, your ideas, what you would like to see in the future, and then if they needed assistance, so if the SoilCon needed some technical assistance for your animal waste, they would bring in an engineer. Or if you were interested in a tree planting, we might involve Jason or Ryan to help establish those plans for trees. If you were looking for cover crops, we'd give you a plan or the species mix based on what your goals are with your cover crops. So there's going to be some changes on how we make the approach so we can make it a little more efficient, a little more one-stop shop for producers, so they're not having to come to St. Cloud or Waite Park, multiple times. We'd like to meet you guys out in the field and see what you guys are thinking and how you guys want to move forward with the process. So that's kind of some of the changes. We also have that sign up going. We have CSP that we take continuous applications for. So that if you're interested in a whole farm type plan, CSP is an option for folks. That would give you a 5-year contract for implementing basically nutrient management, pest management, cover crops, no-till, and there's a lot of different options. Wildlife habitat establishment like pollinators and trees and increase in buffers. So we've got a lot of things going on. We've got a lot of people who are working on that. And I think with the Soil and Water team and NRCS together, I think we'll be able to make things happen again in 2020. So we're looking forward to the new year.
Shameless plug for wildlife here too. Anybody that's thinking of applying for EQIP, I highly encourage you to be willing to put in one of those pollinator plots or some native habitat, because it's only going to boost your score under EQIP, and it's going to make you more likely to get that financial assistance. And there's areas on every single farm where you're not using right now. Those are areas I would highly encourage you to think about doing some sort of a pollinator habitat, because you're going to score better and be more likely to get money.
Speaking of pollinator habitat, our Pheasants Forever Stearns County chapter provided some funds to the Stearns County Soil Water Conservation District to get some plots, pollinator habitat established on some non-ag land. And maybe Ryan or Jason could just quickly share that information with our listeners. I know we only got a few minutes left here, but Ryan, would you like to just give us an update of who we're partnering with to try to stretch those dollars?
We'll make it snappy then. So last summer, we reached out to a nonprofit organization called the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund. They focus strictly on pollinator habitat. Their big thing is providing seed to landowners who want to do pollinator projects. So we have now begun a partnership with them where they are going to provide us with pollinator seed for projects for landowners in Stearns County that are interested in doing a pollinator project. We're looking for typically non-crop ground. It's the areas that either expired out of CRP and aren't eligible anymore, or areas that were never eligible for CRP. We're looking for sites that are at least a half acre in size, and typically, it could be anything like an old grass field that you're not doing anything with. But I think this is going to be a really good partnership. I think it's a really good opportunity for landowners that haven't been able to get into CRP. And we're also going to be providing some cost share using that Pheasants Forever money to help landowners with their site prep and with the planting establishment. So I think it could be a really good program.
But if you're a non-ag home or residence, how do you tie that all in to their benefit, or what's their benefit, or how do they become part of the program, I guess?
Well, a lot of times I think it's people that are just looking for habitat. Those are the people, and this is certainly, it doesn't have to be non-ag, just in the sense of, like I was mentioning, for areas on the farm where somebody's not doing anything with, if it's something they just wanted. Yeah, if it doesn't meet cropping history, if they have an area on the farm that's an acre that they're sick of mowing the lawn, even, it can be as simple as that. Yeah. All they have to do is contact us, basically.
Yeah, if they have a big yard, and they just are tired of mowing, then one of those opportunities is to plant it into some sort of native habitat. The other thing is that EQIP isn't all just for producers that have big farms. Some of it is targeted towards, we'll call it an urban landowner or a small hobby farm acreage. And we do provide cost assistance for high tunnel installation, which are basically the smaller greenhouses for vegetable gardens. So if you have opportunities for something like that, or looking to try that out, we do have cost assistance for that kind of deal also.
Okay. All right. Anything else, Dennis? We got about 30 seconds.
Meow.
All
right.
Knew that was coming.
No, just your listeners, if there's any questions, please contact our office. And our telephone number is 320-251-7800, extension 3. We also have a website out there. Google Stearns County SWCD, and we'll pop up. We got a lot of stuff going on there, and don't be afraid to pose a KASM question from our website, and we'll get it answered the next time we come here.
What's the incentive for them to do that? Possibly. You were talking about
a baseball cap.
There you go.
Yeah, you got to leave your name though. This was just a Stearns County farmer here. We got a lot of those, so we can't afford a hat for every farmer. But definitely pose a question, and we'll see you out on the airwaves. This is Dennis Fuchs with the Stearns County Soil Water Conservation District.
Thank you, Dennis. Also, Jason Selvog, Chris Hogge, and Ryan Rothstein. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it this morning.